Well, welcome back to another episode of the Always About People show. I'm your host, Chris Allen, and today I'm excited about our guest and our topic of conversation. We're obviously off-site, not in our regular studio, but I came here to James' office to hang out with a good friend. James and I have known each other for about 10 years, and we're just excited to get into this conversation about mentoring. Before we jump in, though, whether you're watching live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or on YouTube, we're glad that you're joining with us for another conversation. Again, we try to bring relevant content related to the workplace, to people, to what affects people. And today, we thought it would be really appropriate to cover this topic on mentoring. Obviously, in the workplace today, you're hearing things like the quiet quit and the great resignation, and all of these terms about how the workplace may be affecting people. But even in the workplace and in our work environments, we can grow and develop leaders through mentorship. And over the last 10 years that I've known James, he's been a good friend. He's an entrepreneur, and he's built some really successful enterprises, but he's really good at putting himself in the direction of mentors. And one thing that I really appreciate about you is that you have always surrounded yourself with mentors. And it takes a level of humility to say, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to be developed by people. And so I thought, man, I'm going to take this show on the road. I'm going to go to James' office. I'm going to figure out a way to have this conversation with somebody who knows a lot about mentoring. And so I am just super excited to introduce you to my good friend, James Scruggs. James.
Thank you, Chris. I am glad and delighted and grateful to be here today.
Man, it's so good to have you on the show. Again, for those of you who are watching, I want to remind you, I'd love it. We would love it if you would send in comments, questions. We can see them. We'll answer them on the fly. And if you happen to be watching this after the fact as a recording, still ask a question, make a comment. We'll get back to you. We'll respond. I promise you we'll do that. And so if there's something on your mind, I encourage you to have the courage to send in the comment or question. But James, I want to jump right in.
All right.
I would love it if you would take just a few moments to share a little bit about your story,
okay,
and how you got to this place. And then we'll engage in our topic of the day, which is the impact of mentoring people.
Absolutely.
All right. A little bit of your story.
So a little bit of my story, Chris. You know a lot of this, but originally from Long Island, New York. Went to UVA undergrad, and after my first semester at UVA, my mom called me, and I don't even know if you know this part, but my mom called me and she said, I have bad news. And I said, what do you mean I got bad news? She said, you have to leave. Like we can't afford for you to come back here the next year. So I cried like a baby, right? And that was the hardest thing I think my mom has ever told me. I fell in love with the school. I fell in love with the environment. To make a long story short, I figured a way out to finish and to get my degree at UVA, but I took a year off.
Okay, pause.
Yep.
I figured a way out.
Mm-hmm.
That might be your life motto. I figured a way out. All right. So sorry, go back.
Yep.
We'll come back to that.
So I figured a way out, and I went to go talk to one of my career counselors at UVA, and I was like, what can I do to get in-state tuition? It's $20,000 a year. We can't afford that. What can I do? And I was like, my godfather said, get a driver's license. I got an address in Virginia. And my career counselor said, that's not going to work. He said, everybody would do that. To make a long story short, I took a year off at UVA. I worked in Charlottesville at Circuit City. And I made a lot of money as an 18, 19-year-old. And I was able to come back to UVA the next year. And I was able to finish my degree at UVA. And then I graduated from UVA in 2000. and I got my first job here in Charlotte, North Carolina at Bank of America. And my career started as a bonds trader. So I did that in 2000. And, I didn't come from money at all, right? Obviously, I couldn't afford school, right? So I didn't come from money. And I always wanted to figure out how to build financial wealth.
Figure a way out.
Wow. Yes. Figure a way out, right? Or figure a way to build financial wealth. So I put my first bonus, which was $30,000, which was a lot of money for me, into the stock market. And this was back when, telecom. So, telecom was not the right sector in 2000, and I lost everything. And I never forget, I told my dad about that, and he said, "Boy, I told you should have put that money underneath the mattress." But that was my dad's mentality. It wasn't mine. Yeah. And I said, "Okay, Lord," I said, "it got to be a different way. What else can I do other than the stocks, right? What else can I do to take a little bit more ownership and how to create some wealth, right?" So one of my fraternity brothers said, "You need to read this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki." And it changed my life. And not bragging or boasting, God gets the glory. But after reading that book, I went out, and mostly on the west side of Charlotte. My first year, I bought 20 single-family homes while I was working at the bank. The next year, I bought 10. I partnered with some guys that I worked with at the bank, and we bought a 35-unit apartment building. And me and him and another brother that went to Morehouse, we partnered and bought a 163-unit building. So we did that from 2000 to 2007. And then we all know what happened in 2008. And I left the bank in 2007 and decided I want to be an entrepreneur in 2008. And then the recession happened, right? So, only God being omniscient knew that was coming, not me, right? And again, I went out to God and said, "What do I do now?" Because it ain't real estate right now, right? So I had to figure it out. What do I do next? Because I knew I didn't want to go back to corporate America. So make the story short, I met somebody who got involved in the senior industry, and they were doing these assisted living homes for seniors, and he invited me to come and see it, and I fell in love with the concept. So make a long story short, in 2008, I started that business, Unlimited Possibilities, and we love and we care for seniors with Alzheimer's and dementia. And then in 2014, I grew that business. 2014, 15, I decided to get my general contracting license, commercial and residential. And then in 2016, I started my development firm. And now we do development and construction. And to this day, I do single-family homes and multifamily townhomes, and we're about to expand into apartments as well. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right. So highlight outline form. Career starts at Circuit City. For those of you who don't know what Circuit City was, it was an electronics company, kind of like Best Buy.
Yep, exactly.
But his first job starts at Circuit City. Then he becomes a bond trader at Bank of America.
Yep.
Then he invests $30,000 in the stock market in telecom and loses everything.
Yep.
Then he invests in 20 rental properties plus 10 rental properties plus apartment complexes, and loses a bunch of it in 2008.
Mm-hmm. No, didn't lose any other real estate. God gets the glory. We kept everything. Only thing I lost was the $30,000 in the stock market. All
right. So he didn't lose again. So he keeps all this real estate. Then in 2008, he begins Unlimited Possibilities, which is these healthcare facilities for memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. He grows that business. And then 2015, gets his contractor's license, begins a development company then later on. And now he's running J.S. & Sons.
And Kingdom Development Partners.
As well as Unlimited Possibilities. Mm-hmm. You're not working at Circuit City anymore.
No.
And do you have any money in the stock market?
So we do, but more so on my wife's side. So I didn't mention that I have a beautiful wife and two amazing boys, Jaden and Malachi, 13 and 9. So even though we're one, but on my wife's side, between 401k and stocks, we do invest in stocks. But mostly for me, I'm strictly all in on real estate.
All right. So that's the story, the quick kind of outline. Now I want to cover how you have spent your life surrounded by mentors.
Wow.
And I really want to know, I would love for you to share who taught you that mentors were important. Where'd that come from?
That's a great question. Now, I can't even say that someone taught me. It was just, something that came over me to say I need to make sure that I keep this one in my life, right? And the very first mentor that I can remember was my mentor that I had at Bank of America when I started my career at Bank of America, and his name was Napoleon Stevenson. I'll never forget. One thing I didn't tell you guys is that when I was at UVA, I was the guy who threw all the parties, right? So I threw the parties, I threw the balls, and that's one of the ways that I helped get through, pay for school as well. So being young, right, 21, 22, whenever I moved back to Charlotte, I still had that itch to still throw parties when I moved to Charlotte,
He's
right?
the party animal.
I was a party guy still. And I never forget, so at Bank of America, being a bond trader, you had to pass the Series 7 and the Series 63. And I threw a party, I never forget, the weekend right before I was supposed to take my Series 7 and 63. And I failed on that Monday. I took the Series 7 or 63, one of them, and I failed it. And my mentor, Napoleon, sat me down and said, Scruggs, no more parties. He just shut it down. No, he seriously, like, and that saved me, because the rule at Bank of America back then was you only had 2 chances to pass your 7 and 63, right? So if you don't pass it after the second time, you're out. And I forget, and Napoleon, and not only did he mentor me from a perspective of making sure that I got focused and I just focused on my career and said, all right, it's time to leave these parties alone. But I watched him as a mentor, how he was with his wife before I got married, how he was with his kids.
Yeah.
And when I tell you this man planted so many seeds in my life, it was such a blessing. But that's how it started. I have so many mentors, but he was my first mentor that truly deposited a lot in my life.
So you did mention reading that book.
Yes.
Robert Kiyosaki.
Yes.
On kind of investing in real estate.
Absolutely.
In some ways, that author came to life as a mentor as well.
Absolutely.
How did that affect some decisions you made?
It showed me a lot, right? So yes, even though I personally never met Robert Kiyosaki, but the man has resonated and helped change my life, because, and anybody who, whether you into real estate or not, I highly recommend you reading that book. But it just showed the perspective of his rich dad and his poor dad, right? And I had the poor dad in real life, right? Never had a rich dad, but I had the poor dad in real life who said, hey boy, go ahead and put that money underneath the mattress, which he actually said. And then I saw the concepts that he taught in that book about what you should do if you truly want to go out here and gain economic wealth, right? So the concepts that I learned and I got out of that book, right? I never thought about it that way, in all honesty, until now. But yes, that was a way that he mentored to me through his key concepts in that book. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Napoleon at Bank of America.
Absolutely.
You leave Bank of America. You go all in on real estate. 2007 timeframe.
Well, I go all into real estate from 2002 to 2007, and then 08 happened, and then real estate stopped.
Okay. Between 02 and 07. Any mentors in your life then as you built that real estate?
So I would say, during that time, it was still Napoleon from a perspective of, mentoring me at the bank, because I was at the bank the whole time I did that. And then I had a guy named Charles Amina, who was this huge investor in Charlotte, who, really kind of helped me as well to get into real estate, right? Like, he actually sold me some properties. He showed me how to buy property. So Charles is another person that I highly recommended. He's a person that just was a huge blessing in my life, and truly showed me how to navigate the system of real estate. I started buying houses at the courthouse steps. So Charles was a person that ended up helping me navigate that system, which was a whole nother animal in itself. And then, my fraternity brother, his name is Doug Jones, right? He was my realtor at the time, and he was like, helping me through the process when I first got started in regards to, making sure I picked the right properties and telling me the difference between, appreciation and cash flow, right? So now you sit me and got me thinking. I'm like, Nigel Long is another person, right, who helped, me and educate me about real estate when I got through the process. So, so that's like 3 or 4 more just from that time span from 2002 to 2007.
Yeah. So the topic of our conversation today, the impact of mentoring people. Mike Miller just sent a note in and just said, a great story. Sometimes we're mentoring and don't even realize it. Assume someone is always looking. And the truth is, sometimes we're not even aware of all the people who've had an influence on our lives, right?
Absolutely.
And so when I think about the purpose of leadership, the purpose of leadership is to develop other leaders. The purpose of leadership is to develop other people. And when we look back over our lives, most of us would say, I learned the most about leadership from somebody else. Somebody taught me how to do this, how to do this. Somebody came alongside. Your story is one of people, even people that you're realizing right now, that have impacted the decisions you've made and the career choices you've made and the entrepreneurial ventures that you've gotten into. What would you say to somebody who's like, man, I've never had a mentor. What should I do?
So I would tell anybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in the workforce field, you kind of, it just kind of happens, right? Like it's not something that's just you force yourself into finding one, right? It just kind of happens, right? And then, to Mike's point, you sometimes you just don't even realize this person could be truly mentoring you, right? Or being a blessing in your life or planting seeds in your life, right? So, I just think that, if somebody in your career and you knew that you wanted to excel in your career, then you should seek out somebody who that is doing well at that workplace, right? And you say, hey, and this is what I did all the time.
Okay, now you're getting to the answer.
Well, this is, yeah. So I didn't know. So this is what I did. If it was somebody that I wanted to be my mentor, right, I would say, hey, would you mind being my mentor? Like, can I take you to lunch, right? Like, now, 90% of the times my mentors all back in the days treated me to lunch, right? Yeah. But I would say, can I take you to lunch, right? Because your time is valuable, right? I do that now with one of my mentors, Mr. McCall, right? So it's and I've never met somebody says, oh no, I don't have time to be your mentor, right? Maybe you want to talk to so-and-so over here. No, I mean, anybody that I've ever asked said absolutely, right? Now, it's just really asking that question, humbling yourself, taking them to lunch, taking them to dinner, right? But make sure that when you with them, know that for me, I've always been a guy who said, I'm not wasting your time because everybody's time is valuable. So I'm coming with questions, I'm coming with ideas, right? And I'm looking for you for advice, right? So, and I think any mentor appreciates that if they know that you come to them and you come into them well prepared, if that makes sense.
Okay. So I think I want to rehash a few thoughts, and then Derek, we'll get to the definition of mentor in a second. All right. So I asked this expert in mentorship, for someone who's looking for a mentor, where does it start? Well, it starts by you asking somebody. First, find out someone who is successful in something that you want to develop. Could be marriage, could be parenting, could be work related, could be real estate, could be investing, whatever it is. Find somebody who is successful there and then ask them if they will mentor you. Then you said something that's really important, and I don't even know if you recognized it, but it involves humility. So nobody wants to mentor somebody who's not teachable. Absolutely. So it's like, hey, will you mentor me? And then I'm not going to listen to anything you have to say. Absolutely. Nobody wants to waste their time. And so there's a humility and a teachability that's involved.
Absolutely.
Then, hey, can I take you to lunch? Can I take you to dinner? Whether you pay for it or they pay for it doesn't matter, but that's the ask. And then when you come with questions, come with a teachable heart, come with a humility, and take some notes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if you're in that place where you're like, man, I'd love to be surrounded with some mentors, the challenge would be, have you asked? Mm-hmm. Have you asked anybody? And then what's your heart? What's your humility? So let's get back to Derek's question. How would you define a mentor?
I mean, for me, it's someone who wants to invest their time and their treasure in me, right? So whatever that is, I mean, like I've had mentors that I might go to about one thing. It could be business related, like Richard Nichols. He's another one of my mentors. I'm probably going to name 20 on his show, but Richard Nichols, right? And Sonia Nichols, his wife, right? But one thing I loved about Richard is that we would go, and so he would get together and he would have a group of guys coming, and we would meet like quarterly for breakfast, and he would mentor us and talk and see how our business is going and whatever. But the one thing that he made sure that he would always ask each and every one of us, because we were all married, how's your wife? Is she happy? How's your children? Right? Like, so it was bigger than business, right? Like, to your point, like, even if you might go to a mentor who you think you might want to help you and advance your career or advance your business, right? But they might drop other seeds and other blessings in your life. So for me, defining a mentor is someone who truly is invested in me, not just in the one thing that I might have came to him for, which is, hey, what do you think about this idea that I have in business, related to business? But they making sure that I'm taking care of myself health-wise. They're making sure I'm taking care of my family, which is my first ministry. So really just, I define it as someone who's really want to pour their time and treasure to making me a better person overall. Yeah.
I would just simply say someone who views you as a worthwhile investment. Now, this is just something really funny that I just thought of. You know, companies say people are our greatest asset.
Absolutely.
Okay, but in the accounting world, assets depreciate over time. So people are really our greatest investment, because investments are supposed to appreciate. Robert Kiyosaki would have said that. So you invest in things that appreciate. So if my thought process around a mentor is somebody who believes that their investment in you is a worthwhile investment, meaning it's going to appreciate. Nobody wants to mentor somebody that's going to depreciate.
Absolutely.
And so it's a worthwhile investment. I think what I want to do now is I want to say, okay, we've been talking about mentorship and the effect that mentors can have on our lives and our decision making, and we want to be surrounded with mentors. When does mentorship stop?
Well, here's the thing. For me, it never stops, right? And not only does it never stop, because for me, I can be 75, like, I could be 75 years old, but I'm still going to have a mentor, right? I'm going to be 75 years old, but I'm still going to reach back and do exactly what Mr. McCall, who's one of my biggest mentors right now in my life, says, look, I want you to go back and reach back and make sure that you deposit the same thing that I'm trying to deposit you. And so if I try to help you take your business to the next level, then you reach back and you help 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So for me, it never stops, because I never want to stop being mentored to, and I never want to stop mentoring others.
All right. So this is where I want to kind of land this thing. It's like mentorship is one thing. If I'm in this place of humility, I'm teachable, I want to learn and I want to grow. But if that investment stops with me,
you're losing it.
I become a stagnant body of water.
Absolutely.
And I become the Dead Sea.
Absolutely.
And so there has to be inflow and outflow.
Absolutely.
Maybe talk for a few minutes on, I would love to know, how are you taking what you're learning from these mentors and passing it on?
So
whether intentional or not.
Well, so making sure that I give back and mentor to other people, it has to, for me, it's intentional, right? So like, that's one of the, before even Mr. McCall asked that, before actually Napoleon said the same thing. It was crazy. He's like, he was me and a couple other people at the bank that he mentored. He said, the only thing I ask for you guys is that one day you go back and do the same thing. Mr. McCall said, the only thing I ask, James, I'm going to be your mentor. Now he's my actual friend, right? And I would call all of my mentors now friends, right? So they're mentors, but they have actually truly became my friend. So what I would say is that, it's very important for me. So I'm very intentional now about making sure that I reach back to other young cats or brothers or sisters or people who says, I heard you do real estate. I got questions at. So you know what I do? I go to our spot that me and you love. I take them to Brick Tops, and I'm an open book, right? Right. So I tell them the things that I did right. I tell them the things that I did wrong, right? And then I took a page out of Richard Nichols' book. I took a page out of Napoleon's book, but I said, look, the one thing I would tell you that if you want to be an entrepreneur that you got to make sure that you take care of is your family. Because real talk, that it's already hard enough being an entrepreneur, but if you ain't taking care of your wife and your children and you got a whole bunch of riffraff going over here, it just makes what you got to do day to day in the business much harder. So I was like, that's the most important as an entrepreneur. So I make sure that I drop that, whether you married or single, because you're going to eventually get there. I drop that nugget. And so I'm very intentional about making sure that I give back, but I'm also intentional about taking the nuggets that I got from my mentors and giving back to my mentees.
Yeah. So I think that's really valuable, because sometimes we think of mentors as this person's going to make me successful in something. But the reality is what we're talking about is holistic development. And the best mentors are the people who invest in us as people because they believe that we're a worthwhile investment, not just for real estate knowledge or some specific investment advice, but that they care about who I'm becoming, the relationships around me, the places that I impact, the places in the community that I'm involved in.
I'll give you an example. So I'll never forget this story. Me and Mr. McCall were at 300 East having lunch. It's probably about 4 or 5 months ago. And so he was already, he got there, I got there, and I sat down and he looked at me and he said, man, James, you look like you might want to, stay away from the table a little bit, right? You look like you're gaining some pounds, right? Now, hear me out now. This is my mentor. He noticed that, hey, you need to lose some weight, right? But that came from a great place, right? I needed to hear that, right? Like he saw it. Like he doesn't just look at me as his mentor. He looks at me as a friend, right? Like you need to make sure that you keeping your health in order, right? So he told me, like, hey, are you watching are you working out? So I tell you that because a mentor also is going to give you tough love too, right? Not just tell you everything you want to hear, right? Like, and when I tell you, like, I just saw him last week, and I always tell that story because it meant something to me, because it showed me that he cares about me, not just how I do business wise, right? He cares about me all around, right? My well-being, my health, right? Like that's what a true mentor would do. Like they truly care about you.
That's great. Well, we talk about it often with the organizations we work with, that the reason that people are so offended with feedback is because they don't believe it's coming from a great place. So if my intent in giving you feedback is to make myself look better, to tear you down, to climb higher than you, to assert my authority, well, people are pretty smart. We have intuition, and most people see right through that and go, I'm not accepting your feedback. But when we know someone cares deeply about us, when we know that their intent is for our good, when they are willing to invest in us because they see potential, well, then when somebody sits down and says, you've gained some weight, instead of being offended, we take it to heart and go, wow, maybe there's some things I need to change because it's coming from a place of great intent.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Absolutely.
All right. So here's what we entered into today, a conversation on the impact of mentoring people. The impact of mentoring people is creating better people.
Absolutely.
Developing better people.
Absolutely.
The greatest impact of mentoring is that the people in our lives that we are either mentoring or being mentored by, that all of us are becoming holistically better. So yes, you may have mentors in specific areas of your life, but the whole point in having a mentor would be somebody believes that investing in you is a worthwhile time or a spend of their time.
Absolutely.
And I think from James' story, you've heard that whether he's at the bank or he's in real estate or he's building unlimited possibilities or he's developing communities, or it's in his marriage or as a dad on the soccer field where you spend most of your time. mentorship is about developing us as people. I hope that you were able to take just a few practical things away. I do think one great place to start would just be to ask somebody, hey, you're successful in this area. Would you go to lunch with me? Could I buy you lunch? I just want to ask you some questions. And then if somebody's willing to invest in you over a meal, make sure you come prepared. Make sure you bring some questions. Make sure that you're taking notes. Make sure that you are intentionally leaning in with a posture to grow and learn, because that's what this is all about. James, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What
brother.
a fantastic conversation. I hope you guys got something from that. Whether you're watching on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, we're glad that you've joined us. I want to just remind you, we try to bring you relevant content every week with some incredible guests like James. Thanks for being here with us today. We'll see you next time.